Pixar's A Bug's Life. The movie I thought I made up. I'm not joking. For the longest time, I thought this movie was a fever dream that I had that was etched into my brain. It wasn't until worrisomely recently did I learn that it is in fact a real movie. I mean, look at this. Look at this and tell me that a sound-minded person came up with this.
I'm finished!
Directed by Toy Story director John Lasseter and co-directed by Andrew Stanton, A Bug's Life seemed to be an experiment for Pixar while simultaneously being a genuinely good movie. Despite being head over heels in love with Pixar, I don't think I've ever watched this movie from start to finish until now. Probably because I didn't even think it was real. So I honestly wasn't expecting much from this movie, but I was pleasantly surprised by it. A Bug's Life has a very good combination of characters, unjustifiably funny moments, and a very home-hitting message that Pixar is known for. One thing I think separates A Bug's Life from other Pixar movies is its presentation. As I said earlier, this movie feels like an experimental phase for Pixar as they try to really push their resources. The environments such as Ant Island, yes, that's really what it's called, and the Bug City feel very underwhelming when comparing them to Toy Story set pieces. Toy Story's world feels very detailed, and everything has a sense of scale since the toys need to trek through a larger-than-life world. A Bug's Life lacks that sense of scale. While it's obvious that the bugs are small, there's nothing that really grounds them in being a shared but separate world from our own. The only real exception I can think of is the rain scene at the very end that shows that a normal sprinkle for us is a full-on natural disaster for them. The movie Ants actually does this sense of scale issue pretty well, and it, funny enough, came out only a month after A Bug's Life. Normally this would be a complaint, but I actually think there's a worthwhile excuse for the lackluster set pieces. That excuse being the entire concept of the movie. Pixar is very good at having a diverse cast of character designs. Every character from Toy Story is recognizable just by their silhouettes. So when it was decided for A Bug's Life to focus on a colony of ants, the challenge then is to make characters stand out from one another while also having enough characters for the colony to actually feel like, well, a colony. There are so many scenes that have so many ants on screen that it's actually insane. Well, insane for the time that it was made, anyway. Pixar gave up resources on their environments so they could squeeze as many characters on screen as possible. In order to do this, the designs of the ants are fairly simple. While the main characters have their own colors and facial features that let them stand out, almost all of the background characters are very simplified. I wouldn't be surprised if Pixar reused assets and copy-pasted the same ant over and over again. And it's possible that they push their systems to their limits in order to achieve this. It's not crazy nowadays to put a large amount of characters onto a movie screen, but this was Pixar's next big technological accomplishment. For 1998, this movie is insanely impressive. Moving on to the plot of the movie, A Bug's Life follows the story of Flick, played by David Foley, the sweetest ant you will ever meet. Flick is an outcast within the colony because of his uniqueness and accident proneness. Flick is an inventor, but his inventions normally lead to disaster, causing mind-numbing issues for the colony and Princess Ada, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Flick only ever wants to help the colony, but the other ants push back on his ideas simply because they go against their traditional ways. However, Flick's biggest screw-up yet not only justifiably angers the colony, but infuriates the grasshoppers. The grasshoppers are genuinely terrifying. They all have these muted browns and greens that contrast the bright blues and purples that the ants have, and they just tower over every single one of them. I believe that the grasshoppers are one of the most intimidating groups of villains in any Pixar movie. Well, maybe except for Malt. The grasshoppers are led by the very scary Hopper, who is played by Kevin Spacey? When I first watched A Bug's Life in full, Hopper was one of the things that made me very excited to talk about this movie. So you can understand my disappointment when I found out that Kevin Spacey, of all people, voices him. For those who aren't up to date, Spacey was recently charged with the act of sexual assault against 4 different people, some of which being underage at the time of their incidents. And tragically, 3 out of the 4 victims have suspiciously passed away over the past couple years. Kevin Spacey is an evil, horrible human being. It will be very hard to talk about Hopper while also separating Spacey from him, but being the main antagonist, I still think it's important to talk about Hopper's impact on the story. And I do believe you can still enjoy A Bug's Life despite Spacey being in it, because there are a lot of genuinely great things in this movie. In my opinion, Hopper is one of Pixar's greatest villains. Not only is he visually disturbing, everything about him radiates fear. While he does have some goofy moments to help break the tension, I think Hopper is a very stress-inducing villain. I literally got stressed listening to his slow, gruff, commanding voice. His body even makes these gross cracking sounds whenever he moves, making him feel like a walking skeleton. Hopper is the main contributor between the unbalanced power dynamic between the ants and the grasshoppers. He takes advantage of the ants' individual fears and weaponizes that fear into making them do whatever he wants, despite him being afraid of what the ants can accomplish when they're united. But we'll talk about that later. The deal that the two parties have is that the ants have to gather not only enough food for themselves, but enough food for the grasshoppers before the summer ends. And in exchange for that food, the grasshoppers offer their protection. However, all of that comes crashing down when one of Flick's machines accidentally destroys all the food, leaving the grasshoppers with nothing. Now on a severe time crunch, the ants now have to gather twice the amount of food for the grasshoppers in less than half the time. Understandably, the colony is extremely upset at Flick for this. And when trying to figure out a way to punish him, Flick comes up with the idea of leaving Ant Island in search of bugs that will help get rid of the grasshoppers for good. Given that this idea would get Flick as far away from the colony as possible, Princess Ada and her royal council agree to his venture. So, Flick goes on an adventure that no other ant was brave enough to do, with Princess Dot being his only supporter. Dot, played by Hayden Panettiere, is a very important character to Flick. She, like him, is an outcast within the colony in her own right. While she is royalty, she isn't taken seriously by the adults because of her age and is picked on by her peers because of her small stature. She also supports him by encouraging his inventions and actually finds them cool. And in turn, Flick is one of the few people in Dot's corner. He believes that she can do great things, but understands that she can't really make a difference yet because of how young she is. I wouldn't be surprised if Flick sees a lot of himself in Dot. I highly doubt Flick was the popular kid in school, so him being a supportive parental figure for her when he most likely didn't have one himself is very heartwarming. And Dot in return is the only person who truly believes that Flick will make it back alive with the warrior bugs that he promised. Flick's journey, however, is surprisingly cut short as the second he gets to the city, he finds his chosen warrior bugs. The circus bugs. The circus bugs are this movie's big supporting cast. And I mean big. It'll take a second to get through all of them, so just bear with me. First, there's Francis, the short-tempered yet good-at-heart ladybug that is justifiably angry all the time because people keep misgendering him based on his feminine appearance. There's Slim, the overdramatic walking stick. Get it? Slim? Walking stick? It's funny. Good joke. There's Dim, the gentle giant rhinoceros beetle with his mother figure, Rosie, the Black Widow. There's also the two acrobatic pillbug twins, Tuck and Roll. Manny, the old and wise praying mantis with his elegant and soft-spoken wife, Gypsy, the moth. Probably a good thing for Manny that he won't have to worry about getting his head eaten. The last member being one of the most terrifying animated characters of all time, the German gluttonous caterpillar, Heimlich. Heimlich was the main contributing factor to me believing that I made this movie up. This cursed image machine is so abnormal, I thought my hyperactive brain made it up because there was no way it was an actual character in an actual movie. I was wrong. The circus bugs are social outcasts much like Flick, so the only method of being something other than nothing is to be a part of the circus run by P.T. Flea. Great name, by the way. Unlike Flick, though, the circus bugs have a very strong sense of family among them. They actively support and stand up for one another when they need it. Flick has never had support within his community, while the circus bugs have formed a tight-knit community while society as a whole rejects them. So when they all come together to rush to Francis's aid against the flies, Flick is able to mistake them for the warrior bugs he's been searching for. Now, obviously, this is a huge misunderstanding. While Flick believes that they are brave fighters, the circus bugs believe that Flick has hired them to perform a show for the grasshoppers. And due to a myriad of other misunderstandings, the colony ends up believing the same thing as Flick. This leads to the celebration scene, which radiates a lot of theater kid energy. Actually, this movie in general radiates theater kid energy, and I can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm a theater kid. However, the theater kid's performance leads the circus bugs to understanding what they just got themselves into, and they immediately want nothing to do with it. At the same time, Flick learns who he just hired and is very desperate to come up with a way to cover his ass. If the colony finds out that Flick hired a bunch of circus performers, then he'll be in even more trouble than he already was. While Flick tries to come up with some sort of plan, the circus bugs make a break for it. You can't really blame them either. Given that all they've done up to this point is look after themselves, you can't expect them to immediately want to do the right thing. But funny enough, they immediately go to doing the right thing by helping save Princess Dot from the bird. Francis is actually the first one to come to her aid after realizing she's in danger, even getting injured in the process, which really shows how good of a person he is despite his sour attitude. After successfully saving Dot, the circus bugs receive something that they have never had before. Applause. The circus bugs have never been wanted before. They most likely only joined the circus because it was the only place that would take them, and PT sure as hell doesn't care about them unless they're making him money. So when an entire colony gives them the recognition they've been wanting probably their entire lives, they can't help but feel overwhelmed with joy. So much so that they end up changing their minds and choose to stay in order to appease their newfound fans. But the question still stands how they plan on helping the colony while also not fighting the grasshoppers directly. Flick puts his brain to use and comes up with a plan to build a bird that they can pilot from the inside to scare off Hopper and his gang. And everyone seems to be on board with that plan. It's realistic since every bug's fear is of birds, and it gives a reason for the colony to come together while giving the circus bugs an out. And of course, when the main characters unite under a common goal, the bonding begins. Despite them lying, the circus bugs become integral within the colony. While Dim, Tuck, and Roll help with the physical building of the bird, Francis and Rosie become parental figures to the younger ants. The colony itself grows as they do something they've never done before for the sake of the colony. They even accept outside help from the circus bugs, something that goes against their old-fashioned methods. All thanks to Flick. Flick might be one of the most influential main characters I have ever seen. While he is very insecure and honestly kind of stupid, he inspires almost everyone around him. Princess Ada has been very self-conscious about her leadership skills. She doesn't believe that she is worthy of the crown and second-guesses herself constantly. This is even worsened after Hopper interrogates her, saying that it's always your fault when you're the one in charge. That all changes though when Flick is by her side. Much like Dot, Flick is undyingly supportive of Ada. He gives her someone in her corner, something she's been missing within her own colony. The colony doubts her efforts, making Ada an outcast in her own right. While she isn't excluded because of her age or knowingness, she's excluded because of her lack of self-confidence. So when someone like Flick comes along and gives her that support, she ends up being more confident in the long run. Flick even starts to strike Ada's fancy as she sees how sweet and charming he actually is. However, this newfound community does not last long as PT, being the flea that he is, comes and ruins it. The colony knows now that the circus bugs are just circus bugs and not the warriors that they thought they were, as well as finding out that Flick lied to all of them. Ada and the rest of the colony are very upset at Flick for this, and unlike Flick's initial screw-up at the beginning of the movie, they feel more betrayed than angry. Especially Ada, who has now formed a very strong connection with Flick. She originally wanted nothing to do with him, but now that they have this connection, she feels betrayed that he would take advantage of her trust like this. The colony doesn't even seem that mad at the circus bugs and channel all of their anger at Flick. Princess Ada banishes Flick from the colony, and they are now left to scrounge up any amount of food for the grasshoppers before they get there. With Flick falling into a depression and the colony in shambles, they go their separate ways. When Hopper eventually returns, him and his gang are pissed at the amount of food that the ants have gathered. Given that the ants spent a lot of the summer building the bird, there was no way they were going to gather the amount that was requested. Hopper then takes over the island and holds a feast where they eat all of the food that the ants have gathered, with the big finale being him killing the queen in order to set an example. When Dot gets word of this, she does the only thing that she can and leaves the island in search of help. Finally being able to fly, she rushes off to hopefully catch Flick and the circus bugs before it's too late. When Dot finally catches up with the others and tells them of Hopper's plan, the circus bugs are ready to jump into action, which is the exact opposite of how they acted before. However, Flick is so dejected he wants no part of it. Flick has always wanted to help the colony, but he now sees himself how the colony used to think about him. someone who just gets in the way. When Flick first saw the circus bugs standing triumphantly, that's how he wanted people to see him. A shining light of hope that can inspire others. But even though he has done that, he doesn't know it because he's too ashamed of his selfish acts. But the circus bugs tell him exactly who he is. An inspiration. When Flick first saw the circus bugs standing triumphantly, he also saw who they would eventually become. Not only did they give the colony a light of hope, they grew their own self-images and now see themselves as finally worth something, all because Flick saw them. With Dot giving one last supportive push, they rally up and come up with a plan to both save the Queen and get rid of Hopper once and for all. Their plan being to sneak the Queen away while getting the bird ready for takeoff. Paired with great performances from the circus bugs, their plan seems to be going very well, until PT has to come and ruin it. Again. But this is where Flick is really able to prove that he is an inspiration. You see, the power dynamic between the grasshoppers and the ants was never about food. As Hopper says, they always have enough food to last them through the rainy season, but as long as they can keep the ants in line, they will always have power over them. Hopper craves their submissiveness because he knows that their individual fears will make them do whatever he wants. But Hopper has another fear other than birds. It's the ants realizing how strong they actually are. All it takes is one ant to inspire them, and Flick is that one ant. Flick exclaims that the ants are so strong that they are somehow able to gather enough food for themselves plus the grasshoppers. That they are so strong to come together and accept help from outside their community to help preserve their salvation. That they are strong enough to get their lives back. Needless to say, the speech works. With the help of the circus bugs, the ants are able to overpower and fight off the grasshoppers, with Flick getting the one-up on Hopper one last time.
Hello, girl!
The ants are free, the circus bugs have a newfound confidence, and Flick is finally accepted. I'm so glad I didn't make up A Bug's Life because I believe this is one of Pixar's most underrated movies. Not only does it have an incredibly unique cast of characters, some being a little bit too unique, it has some great themes involving what makes a strong community, how we desire acceptance, and how we are strong when we are united. The fact that Pixar was able to make an amazing and relatable story about ants goes to show how talented of a studio they are, and I am more than glad that A Bug's Life wasn't just a fever dream. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed my review of A Bug's Life, then please leave a like and comment below your thoughts on the movie. I'd love to hear them. Subscribe in order to catch future reviews, and I'll be sure to save you a seat and some popcorn for when they drop. Safe travels, movie lovers!